Thinking Aloud from the University of Warwick.
Hello and welcome to Thinking Aloud. My name is Vedita, Cowaloosur, and it's my pleasure today to be with Dr. Nasser Eddin. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. I know people massacre my name all the time, so I know how it is. Anyway, Nof is recently completed her PhD from the sociology department, and her thesis was entitled, correct me if I'm wrong again, The Intersectionality of Class and Gender in East and West Amman in Jordan, of course. To this, she's joining us to talk about her experience in East and West Amman and about her interest in the topic in general. No, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So maybe can I start by asking you a sort of personal question, if you don't mind?
Mm-hmm.
How did you arrive at this topic of research? Is there any personal aspect of your background, for instance, or which prompted your interest in this area, or why West and East Amman? Because I know, your origin is, of course, Palestinian.
Yes.
So why Amman?
Well, first of all, I would like to begin by saying that I was always interested in studying women's experiences, and I think it's really important to look at women's experiences apart from men's experiences, because their experiences are different. Well, why I became interested in Amman? Because I lived in Amman prior to doing my PhD. I lived there for 4 years for my undergraduate degree, and I was really struck by the class divisions in the East in Amman. So it's divided into East and West Amman. You can see the divisions with your eyes. The divisions are really clear in terms of infrastructure, people's behaviors, even people's accents, the occupations they have, the lifestyles. So that's what triggered my interest in studying Amman.
Right. Okay. And why women in Amman in specific?
Because as I mentioned earlier, that I'm interested in women's experiences, and maybe because I'm a woman and I know that women share some sort of oppression, patriarchal oppression. So I wanted to understand their experience in terms of their economic activities and how patriarchal structures and how conservative societies can affect women's experiences differently.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you talk about class and gender, and these, of course, figure in the title of your thesis. And class and gender are, of course, two broad, really topical issues. They never cease to be out of scope.
Exactly. And they're different according to different contexts.
Certainly, yes, exactly. and region. You name it, they differ in all sorts of circumstances. How exactly do you conceptualize class and gender in your research?
Can I start by saying that class is not really studied in the Middle East. It's very much understudied.
Right.
And I think we take it for granted. We don't really look at it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of studies focus on gender roles, patriarchy. I look at class from a Western perspective, of course, because as mentioned before, it's not studied in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Western perspective.
From a Western perspective, and in a Middle Eastern context. I look at the economic and the cultural aspects of class. By economic class, I mean the income, education attainment, accommodation, the material stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In cultural class, I look at the lifestyle of people, how people have different lifestyles, how people have different attitudes, the way they dress, the way they eat, where they go to, their leisure time. And I think these both aspects, they interfere, they intersect with one another. And so I don't think that we cannot determine one's class from the occupation, because some people can have the same occupation, however they can have different lifestyles.
Definitely.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was I really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I conceptualize class.
Of course.
And also, I don't look at individual class. I don't look at women's individual class. I look at both areas. So East Amman is the working class, if you like. West Amman is the middle and upper middle class.
Right.
So I look at the collectivistic class, because women do not have individualistic class, because we still live in patriarchal societies.
Uh-huh.
Women still follow either their parents, their fathers, their husband's class.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. Actually, that was going to be my next question, because you mentioned at the beginning that there is a marked difference between East and West Amman.
Yes.
And the way women, well, I mean, like both regions behave in general. But I'm quite interested, of course, in how the woman behaves in these two different regions. So maybe can you elaborate a little more on that?
Well, to generalize it, women in East Amman, for example, they're more conservative. You rarely find a woman without wearing the hijab. It's a very conservative society.
Right.
I used to drive in East Amman, and I was one of the only woman driving without wearing the hijab, for example. Yes, it's very conservative, and it's a poor area.
Right.
It's a poor. In West Amman, it's like westernized again.
Right. Okay.
So people, they live in nice places, they're rich. It's less conservative, but also I'm generalizing. These are the stereotypes.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
You asked me about gender.
Yes.
Patriarchy.
Yeah. Patriarchy. Yeah. Like their relationship, the relationship of the women in these different areas to patriarchy.
Okay.
Of course, they will be different.
Well, as the Middle East and Jordan is a patriarchal society, we still live in patriarchal societies, and I identified structures of patriarchy in my research through my interviews. However, I found out that patriarchy is prevalent in East and West Amman, but it doesn't operate in the same way.
Right.
It operates differently because of class.
Right.
And because, for example, women have different education attainment, women have different economic activities, and women negotiate, challenge to these patriarchal structures differently.
Right.
So that's why it operates differently. So we cannot say just that all women experience patriarchy in the same way.
Of course. Yeah. Right. Since we are on the subject of the Middle East, another aspect that often gets flagged up is that of religion, of course, and especially Islam. A lot of times I think there is this tendency to almost marry the Middle East and Islam in a lot of people's jargon. Of course, I do of course realize that there are other strong tendencies, and there is a strong presence of other faiths such as Christianity and the Baha'i faith, for instance, as well. And a very secular tendency too. But I mean, there is this sort of generalization when talking about the Middle East a lot of times to flag up Islam as a crucial aspect of the Middle East itself. Why do you leave out that?
Islam.
Yes. Why do you leave out religion in general, but of course Islam in particular?
Because first of all, I wanted to ask women about their religion views, but people didn't want to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
There was reluctance to talk about
religion.
Okay.
And also because I interviewed Christian women as well.
Right.
So I didn't want to look at religion because it would be so broad. So I only wanted to focus on two aspects, with gender and class. So that's why I didn't look into religions and Islam.
Right.
So I left it out, and because of the reluctancy of some Muslim women who didn't want to talk about Islam, they thought it's a very sensitive topic to talk about.
Right. But was it the case in both East and West Amman?
Yes.
What people generally reluctant to talk about religion?
Yes, because it's a sensitive topic. You don't talk about religion,
Right.
especially in Amman. It's one of these topics that's it's better to avoid talking about it.
Really? Okay. Well, that's interesting. Would it be the same for the men? Do you think? Would men also refrain from talking about?
I can't really
religion?
say. I don't know because I cannot generalize, and I
Yeah, of course.
and I haven't interviewed men,
Okay.
so I cannot tell.
Oh, that's interesting. And the other interesting aspect as well is that of ethnicity, because of course when we talk of religion we tend to assume they're all of the same ethnicity, which is of course a wrong assumption. So were there differences in the way different ethnic groups reacted? Also, were the ethnic groups equally diverse in both regions?
Again, I didn't look at ethnicity because I only interviewed Arab women. So
Okay. Okay.
So I didn't look, for example, at Circassians, Armenians, Chechens. I only looked at Arab women, and either Palestinians or Jordanian women. So I looked at them coming from the same ethnic group.
Okay.
So I didn't. Yeah, I did it purposely. I didn't want to interview any other woman from any other ethnic minority. But I'm sure if I have done that, other things would have come up.
I'm sure.
Because ethnicity is really an important aspect which intersects also with class and gender, and it should be looked at.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Could I maybe ask you to talk about your experience? You've, of course, talked about this a bit, but can I ask you to elaborate a bit on how women reacted to you when you were interviewing them? Were there differences, for instance, in the way women of a certain class reacted to you? Was there more hesitation on the behalf of women from certain classes? How did they see you? Were they hesitant to come forward?
Well, it's a very good and interesting question, because the research position in the field is really an important aspect. So you have to look at it. Me as a woman, as an educated woman, so for example, women coming from East Amman who are working class women, they looked at me like they looked up to me, so they as if they're waiting for help for me, and they thought that I'm from the government, so they wanted some sort of help, they wanted some sort of assistance in their life. So they always used to tell me, please, can you tell them that we're living in a very hard position? Can you please tell them that we need some help? And I felt really awkward, because I had to explain to them that I'm an independent researcher. I'm doing it for my own benefit somehow, and it was really hard explaining all of these things to them.
Yeah.
As for women from West Amman, I think it was different, because they weren't expecting anything from me. They were living in a very good position. Their husbands worked, and some of them worked, and they provided them with security and money and what they needed. So it was easier for them to explain my research and who I am as a researcher. However, pulling out words from them was more difficult than women from East Amman. East Amman women, they wanted to talk and talk and talk, and they wanted to express their misery and their suffering, and that because they're living in extreme poverty.
So it's not having a daunting experience.
Yeah, it was a bit challenging. Try to explain to them that I'm an independent person who's doing research, and it's PhD research. It's nothing to do with any governmental organization or any third body. I cannot do anything for them. So they used to ask me for an advice over and over again.
Right. Okay.
Other experiences, for example, when I used to go to East Amman, I used to change the way I dress.
Yeah.
Because I used to wear like baggy clothes. I used to wear long sleeves because it's a conservative area,
yes,
again.
Of course.
So I wanted to be more accepted, and of course to respect that culture.
Yes.
I cannot just impose my whole identity
Certainly not. Yeah.
on them. In West Amman, I felt much more fit. Let's say.
You fitted.
Yeah, exactly, because my culture is related to theirs as well, so I didn't have to change in the way I dress or the way I
carried yourself.
Exactly. So these things are really interesting.
Yeah, certainly.
So my positionality in the field was really interesting, because I'm an insider and an outsider. I'm an insider because I speak Arabic. I lived in Jordan. I'm familiar with the environment and with the culture, so I could understand how to behave, how to act in certain situations.
Yeah.
And as an outsider, because I'm from Palestine, I'm not from Jordan, so they saw me as an outsider, so they could talk without hesitation.
Yes, of course, but this whole insider-outsider dynamic is, of course, really quite interesting, especially when you're talking about subjects as contentious
Exactly.
as gender.
Exactly.
How interesting.
But they all want to talk about their experiences, and because I think it's very personal.
Yes, of
it's
course.
very personal, and they wanted to share, and women like to share.
Yes, they do.
So I had a brilliant experience.
One good generalization about women to share.
Yeah.
Okay, well, may I ask, maybe by asking you where you want to take your research further after this? Are you continuing on working on this?
Well, I'm hoping to start publishing journal articles from my thesis.
Yeah, and are you going to continue focusing on women in West and East Amman?
Well, my next thing is I would like to interview men.
Yeah.
I didn't interview men, and I think I would have a different perspective if I did.
Certainly.
Because I'm studying patriarchy, and patriarchy is structure which affects both men and women.
Certainly.
It doesn't only affect women.
Certainly.
So yes, my next step is interviewing men in Jordan.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that would be another interesting podcast, maybe. What men think
maybe.
of women's economic activities in East and West Amman. No, thank you very much for joining us
Vedita.
today.
Thank
you. And
Pleasure.
we hope you enjoyed that. Please join us next time for our next podcast. Thank you.
Thinking Aloud from the University of Warwick.